Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're diving into a super juicy and dramatic manga called Greedy. Seriously, you guys are not ready for the amount of tea we're about to spill today. But before we get into all the mess, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash the like if you love a good romance drama as much as I do. It really helps the channel out. All right, you guys ready? Let's dive right in. The bar was buzzing, but the real noise was at one table where a group of friends were deep in gossip over something they found absolutely insane. They couldn't believe what their mutual friend Yujoo had done. Everyone knew she was in that group chat, which made her actions even more shocking. One of the women was stunned, wondering how someone could end up marrying their friend's ex-boyfriend. They were talking about the wedding of Pyeon Do-hyun and Cha Eun-so, set for May 23rd. The most outrageous part was that it hadn't even been a year since Yujoo and that asshole had broken up. One of the friends took a sip of her beer, clarifying that it had been exactly 8 months. Another asked if Yujoo and Do-hyun had dated for over 3 years. Yujoo, who had been sitting with them in silence, quietly corrected her. It was 5 years. The friends agreed that Eun-so had the nerve not only to do such a thing, but to send out e-invites. Their group chat had gone dead for over a month because of her, and the suggestion of a bridal shower felt like a slap in the face. They unanimously called her a psycho. It turned out Eun-so and Yujoo worked at the same company, and it was a miracle that rumors hadn't already spread through the office. The women even joked about posting all the dirt on a community board, but quickly reassured Yujoo that, of course, none of them would actually go to the wedding. Suddenly, Yujoo cut them off, calmly saying that she didn't care and they could go if they wanted to. Her friends froze in disbelief. One of them admitted that Eun-so had contacted her separately. This sparked a new wave of outrage. The friends couldn't understand how she could have taken the call, calling their friend a fool for being too nice. But how did it come to this? To understand, we have to go back to what happened earlier. Yujoo was in her apartment, on the phone with that very same ex-friend. She was at her breaking point, asking if Eun-so had called just to say that crap, and was about to hang up. But Eun-so, on the other end, was relentless. She coldly stated that Yujoo never really liked Tae-doon that much, and demanded she stop acting like the victim, while also asking what Yujoo had been telling the others about her. For a fleeting moment, an image from the past flashed in Yujoo's mind. She and Eun-so, young and carefree in their school uniforms, laughing as they walked arm in arm. The pain of the betrayal pierced her heart. She clutched the fabric of her shirt, wondering at what exact moment it all went wrong. Back in the bar, the friend recounted her conversation with Eun-so. She wasn't expecting forgiveness. She just wanted them to know they were her only friends from high school. Yujoo took another sip, muttering that she wouldn't have accepted an apology even if one was offered. The other girls exchanged confused glances, unsure how to react. Yujoo forced a smile and suggested changing the subject. She said they hadn't seen each other in a while and shouldn't waste time on bitter talk, since it's hard enough to make plans after work. One of her friends, unable to take it anymore, stared at Yujoo. She bluntly said that out of all of them, Yujoo was the one she understood the least. It was unclear if she was being kind, cool, or just an idiot. The guy she dated for 5 years left her for her high school friend, and she was just sitting there, acting so calm. Another girl tried to stop her, suggesting that Yujoo was doing well in her career and probably didn't give a damn about guys. After all, she had easily quit, gone freelance, and then, just as easily, got rehired. She was only 30. She could meet someone else. Yujoo just sighed wearily in response. The conversation shifted to her job as an editor. A friend asked curiously if she saw celebrities often and if there was any chance of a romance. She mentioned a recent interview with a very popular actor. Yujoo brushed it off, saying it was just work, and she didn't even meet them alone since she was still a junior editor. Her friend was surprised since she wasn't a newbie, but Yujoo sheepishly explained she was on contract and hoping for a promotion soon. Her friends exchanged thoughtful glances. To break the tension, one of them decided to change the subject and started sharing the latest gossip about a young mom in her neighborhood. The evening continued in a lighter atmosphere, filled with laughter and chatter. Later, on the street, the women said their warm goodbyes and went their separate ways. Yujoo walked slowly down the dark street, lost in her thoughts. She felt someone watching her. It was him, her ex-fiancé, Do-hyun. She walked past, trying to ignore him, but he stopped, blocking her path. Do-hyun grabbed her arm sharply, stopping her. He said he understood she was angry, but Eun-so was really hoping she would come to the wedding, since they were old friends. Yujoo coldly demanded he let go. She forcefully yanked her arm away, asking with contempt if he had really dragged himself all the way here just for that. Yujoo cut him off, saying she was fine and she wasn't going. But Do-hyun kept pushing, telling her that Eun-so was crying all the time and asking for her forgiveness. Fed up, Yujoo turned and walked away. But she couldn't hold it in, spinning around and shouting, "Why the hell should she even go?" Do-hyun explained that Eun-so would feel better if Yujoo showed up. Rumors were already spreading among their coworkers that she had stolen her boyfriend, and it was making her uncomfortable. Yujoo sarcastically suggested he tell Eun-so to learn to take criticism for her actions, and asked if her showing up at the wedding would really solve everything. He insisted she just bear with it, since it would all be over after the wedding. He reminded her that she and Eun-so had been friends for 10 years, and asked if that friendship meant nothing. Yujoo then asked him a direct question. What about him, his friends, and his parents? Would they be fine if she came? Wouldn't it be awkward? Do-hyun was silent for a moment, and then his tone turned cold and cruel. He accused her of always telling everyone she was fine, but never being able to say what really bothered her. He declared he hadn't expected anything from her anyway. He went on, saying their relationship was over long before Eun-so was in the picture. They were only lovers in name, had never seriously prepared for marriage, and hadn't even properly met each other's families. As a final blow, he reminded her they hadn't slept together in over 5 months, and claimed he honestly didn't understand why she was so angry. Yujoo's eyes filled with tears of shock and pain. Unable to hold back any longer, she swung her hand, but he caught her arm, stopping the blow. In the next instant, her other hand connected with his face in a sharp slap. Do-hyun was furious. He grabbed her, but she threatened to scream if he didn't let go. He staggered back, clutching his head and cursing. He hissed venomously, asking if other people knew this side of her, flying into a rage over the slightest thing, while in public, she pretended to be nice and helpless. He said that part of her could suffocate anyone, and that their relationship was doomed even without Eun-so. Trembling, Yujoo asked if he had ever treated her like a human being. He repeated his cruel phrase again, ordering her to stop acting like the victim. Tears streamed down her face, and all she could breathe out was, "Fuck off." Do-hyun threw over his shoulder that he'd consider the wound her wedding gift and headed for his car. The car drove off, leaving Yujoo completely alone on the dark street. She stood there, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to stop shaking. Eventually, her strength gave out, and she just sank onto the curb, utterly defeated. With trembling hands, she took out a cigarette and lit it. Her friend's words echoed in her head. The one who couldn't figure out if she was kind, cool, or just an idiot. Cool my ass, Yujoo thought bitterly, holding her head in her hands. She opened the wedding photo on her phone again. He said they weren't preparing for a wedding, but then why was he using the same vendors they had picked out together? Yujoo took a drag from her cigarette. She didn't understand anything anymore. It wasn't that she wasn't angry or couldn't say something unpleasant. She knew that if she showed her anger now, she would just make a fool of herself. The role of a jilted woman who lost both her boyfriend and her best friend at the same time was already too miserable. So, to keep anyone from paying attention to her misery, it was easier to fool herself into pretending that nothing had happened. She remembered her friends trying to cheer her up, saying she was doing well in her career. But she had heard a note of disappointment in their voices. Were they just curious to see her reaction? She immediately corrected herself. They were her friends. They were probably just saying it out of concern. At that moment, she saw a new post on Instagram. Her friends, whom she had just been with, had taken a selfie without her. and under the post was a comment from Unseo, playfully asking why they didn't invite her next time. Yujoo froze, staring at the screen. In that instant, her phone rang. It was Subin, one of her friends. Subin quickly started apologizing for the post, saying she felt weird the second she posted it. She explained that Unseo would get really annoying if she found out they met without her. Yujoo wearily replied that it was fine. She hadn't even seen the post. Subin said with relief that she was glad Yujoo was fine with it. She confessed that she hated Unseo, but loved her at the same time, and it was bothering her. Yujoo thought bitterly that she was the one who was always left on the sidelines. Subin assured her they were on her side and offered to set her up on a blind date. Yujoo, dropping her cigarette, agreed to talk about it next time. She ended the call. Speaking from the heart had become genuinely tiring. It didn't matter if it was loving someone or hating them, it all took too much energy. She put out her cigarette. She told herself she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she didn't need love anymore. Thankfully, she lived in an era where romance was more common than cigarette butts on the street. Her thoughts were interrupted by a call. It was her team leader. He apologized for the late call and asked if she was busy tomorrow. An emergency on-site assignment had come up. She needed to interview Jay, a trending model who was set to be the cover boy for their next issue. The team leader explained that she just needed to write him up as a reasonably well-behaved, pretty younger guy. Yujoo asked if it would be a problem that she knew nothing about the model. Her boss assured her it was fine, as she was always so thorough with her work, and he was counting on her. Walking down the street, Yujoo saw billboards with Jay's face. His posters were everywhere. She overheard some schoolgirls gossiping that Jay had a sponsor and was having an affair. Jay, she thought to herself. Just like with everyone else, she had already formed an opinion of him. A star, drowning in gossip, yet constantly courted by advertisers. Arrogant, fully aware of his place, looking down on everyone else. Emotionally volatile and childish. But then, everything changed. The first time she met him, she saw him crying. It was a deeply ironic sight. In flashy clothes, with meticulous makeup, with a beautiful face. He wasn't under the spotlights, but tucked away in a dark corner, weeping his eyes out. It was at that moment she had approached him and introduced herself as Han Yujoo, an editor from Sora magazine. She explained that she was scheduled for an interview just before the shoot and was on her way to the waiting room. Jay had looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. He asked, in surprise, if she was an editor. Yujoo confirmed, awkwardly adding that she hadn't been following him, she was just on her way. She realized she was rambling and said it was just a coincidence. She had come without even checking his profile. He simply said, "Okay." Yujoo noted to herself how tall he was, and she also thought that he shouldn't be crying before a shoot. She offered him a handkerchief, suggesting he take a break if he was having a hard time pulling himself together. Yujoo added that she would talk to the photographer, and if his later schedule allowed, they could take it slow. She assured him that studio rental times were usually more generous than they seemed. Jay just stared at her silently. He took the handkerchief from her hand. Their fingers brushed for a moment. Suddenly, he asked if she was feeling good because she'd picked up some juicy gossip, or if she didn't really care. Yujoo remained silent. He said with a slight smirk that he was just curious. His tone was deliberately provocative. Yujoo answered honestly and directly. She didn't care. She would prefer if he fixed his makeup, finished the shoot cleanly and quickly, and she would write a light interview while smiling politely. She assured him she wouldn't write a single line mixed with speculation because she hated attention. And she added that her offer to take their time was a lie. Jay watched her silently as she left. Yujoo bowed and said she would go in first. She walked away, leaving him alone. Jay was left standing there, clutching her handkerchief. On the photo shoot set, there was chaos. The photographer was furious, yelling into his phone, trying to find out why Jay still wasn't answering. He was chewing out an assistant, saying the whole crew had been waiting for over 30 minutes. The girl could only apologize. She explained that she had personally brought him to the set, but then a wardrobe issue came up. She didn't know he'd leave without his phone and guessed he might be lost in the huge building. The photographer wasn't buying any excuses, yelling that it was no reason to derail the shoot. He continued to berate the girl, who was only his road manager. Yujoo, watching the scene, thought it was a total mess. She remembered her encounter with Jay, but decided not to get involved. If she said she saw him, they'd grill her about on-set responsibility, and it would get messy. She decided to stay quiet for now. Just then, she got a message from her team leader asking how the situation was on set. Around her, the crew continued to trash Jay, calling him a brat who blew up overnight and couldn't work professionally. Yujoo sighed, not knowing what to tell her boss. The same assistant who was getting yelled at approached her. Yujoo introduced herself as the editor who was scheduled to visit the set today. The assistant became flustered, apologizing, and said she would go look for Jay since he was currently absent. She assured Yujoo there would be no problem with the interview or the shoot, as they still had an hour. But Yujoo stopped her, saying she didn't need to go anywhere. She had just been with him in the smoking room. At that moment, Jay's voice came from behind her, asking with a smile if they were talking about him. He looked perfectly calm and pleased. The assistant squealed with delight. "Jay!" The entire film crew, who had just been bad-mouthing him, turned around in astonishment. The atmosphere changed instantly. Now everyone was fawning over him, saying what an honor it was to work with him and praising his songs. Yujoo thought, ironically, how funny it was that just a minute ago, these same people were trashing him nonstop. Jay silently scanned the room. He walked over to the makeup artist and asked for a touch-up, saying his eyeshadow was a bit smudged. The photographer, who had just been yelling, now looked away in embarrassment. Yujoo watched the scene and thought that it seemed she had nothing to worry about. She texted her team leader that the model had just arrived on set. He asked for a pic to check his outfit. Yujoo raised her phone, hesitating, wondering if it was okay to take a picture. While Jay was getting his makeup touched up, she aimed the camera. The exact moment she pressed the button, Jay turned and looked directly into the lens. Yujoo flinched in surprise. She quickly sent the photo. The assistant called Jay over to introduce him to the editor. She introduced Yujoo as the editor who would be doing the on-site sketch and interview. Jay calmly confirmed that he had heard the schedule. The assistant giggled, noting that he seemed shy in front of the editor. Jay leaned in close to Yujoo and quietly asked if he should pretend like he was seeing her for the first time. He asked with a smile what she thought, adding that his smiling face was easier to look at than what she saw before. Yujoo froze, speechless. The assistant asked curiously if they had met before. Jay held out Yujoo's own handkerchief to her, saying it had come in handy. And then he added, "See you later." He walked off, leaving a baffled Yujoo and assistant behind. Yujoo looked at the handkerchief in her hand. Her cheeks were burning. She picked up her camera to focus on her work. The shoot began. Jay posed for the camera, and the whole team worked in sync. He was a true professional, every move calculated. Yujoo, watching him through the lens, thought he was incredibly engaging. He was a totally different person from the crying boy in the alley. She kept taking pictures, captivated by his transformation. Such a weird kid, she thought. After the shoot, the interview began. Yujoo sat across from him with her laptop, starting by saying he was going through the busiest period since his debut. She mentioned that his overseas fans called him the boy with beautiful eyes. She asked what differences he aimed for in the images he presented on stage versus as a model. Jay answered bluntly. He said he didn't really think about it, and all that nonsense about his eyes was just that. His only goal was to make as much money as possible. Yujoo silently continued typing. She noted that since he was the brand's domestic ambassador, she had expected a more serious answer. Jay admitted that he was the type to ruin things when he opened his mouth, so he didn't really do interviews. Yujoo calmly replied that, in that case, she'd have to make something up herself. Jay smirked. He picked up a cup and asked why she wasn't asking why he was crying his eyes out earlier. He thought she'd at least ask one probing question. Yujoo looked at him in silence. He explained that what people are curious about isn't what he focuses on during a shoot, but who bought the clothes he was wearing. They were interested in who he was with last night, if he did drugs, stories about having a stalker. That's what the public really cared about. Yujoo replied that if there was a chance to cover personal stories, she would do it then. Jae noted sarcastically that she really didn't care at all. He listed the obvious reasons for a celebrity being sad: a slump, loneliness. He added that ordinary people think those worries are a luxury, saying that if you earn that much, you should just deal with it. Yujoo coldly replied that she didn't cover sad stories that drew backlash from the public. To write about something, she needed to be able to empathize first. Then how about this? Jae said, leaning across the table toward her. He got close to her face and whispered, "If I were to die." Yujoo was taken aback by his statement. He clarified that he might not, but the odds were 50-50. "What?" was all she could manage to say. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair, and said it felt like shit. Yujoo's heart started pounding. "A confession," he said, moving close again. She asked why he was telling her this now. He replied that he wanted to tell someone who didn't want to hear it. "Are you finally curious?" "That's a relief," he said with a smile. He added that she just got a chance for a personal interview, right now. Resting his head on the table, he asked if she wanted to get drinks today, if she felt even a little bit sorry for him. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Do-hyun and Eun-seo were having dinner at a fancy restaurant. Eun-seo was amazed by the place and taking pictures of the food. She was touched that he remembered she wanted to come here. Do-hyun was silent, lost in thought, playing with his fork. His mind drifted to the past. He was thinking about Yujoo. She was kind. She'd always come running whenever he called. But she'd also nag him, scolding him for living off his parents' money. She used to say their money wasn't his. He used to wonder if people still packed lunches on dates to save money. Turns out, she did. He remembered her feeding him in the park. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd spent a whole, relaxed day just hanging out with her. She would fill his fridge and clean his room, even though he never asked for any of that. She acted as if she were his mom or his older sister. At some point, it all just got so fucking exhausting. She was so kind, and he became the bad guy in comparison. Even their kisses felt suffocating. He had naturally thought about marriage with her, but he wasn't sure. He couldn't imagine how they'd live. But at the end, when they broke up, she, who used to cry so easily, didn't shed a single tear. He'd never seen that look in her eyes before. He'd seen her angry face, her smiling face, her sad face, but that one felt unfamiliar and strange. He admitted to himself that he really would have turned back if she'd grabbed him even once. But the sickeningly kind Han Yujoo, the idiot Han Yujoo, boring, bland, pitiful, pretty and trivial and changed Han Yujoo, didn't. Do-hyun took a sip of wine, snapping back to reality. Eun-seo pulled him out of his thoughts, asking if he was even listening to her. He apologized and asked her to repeat herself. She happily announced that she had made up with the girls, so he didn't need to worry. Do-hyun's mood soured again. He asked if that meant all the other friends were coming except for Han Yujoo. Eun-seo chirped that everyone was coming and that she had worried for nothing. It was her problem, always jumping to bad thoughts. She even said they decided to do a bridal shower. Do-hyun replied flatly that it was good. Eun-seo suggested they get up soon, but fell silent, noticing his distant expression. They went to the cashier. The bill was 560,000 won. As they left, Eun-seo remarked that Yujoo had a bit of a gloomy side, and the girls didn't really like her much. She asked if he was coming to the bridal shower. Do-hyun was surprised, asking why he would go to a girls' gathering. Eun-seo coyly suggested he was shy and asked him to just stay for a bit, say hi, and bring a bottle of champagne. She complained that she had never properly introduced him to the girls and it had been bothering her. Do-hyun cut her off, saying he didn't have to go. He reminded her that they all met when he was still with Yujoo, and Eun-seo was one of them too. An image flashed in his mind. Him and Yujoo, happy, with her friends. Eun-seo among them. He said he didn't want to go and make it uncomfortable. Eunso was shocked by his words. Do-hyun sighed wearily. He took her hand and apologized, saying he was just a bit tired. Suddenly, Eunso noticed the scratch on his face and cried out, asking what was wrong. She panicked that there wasn't much time left before the wedding and it might leave a scar. Do-hyun brushed it off, saying he just bumped into something. But Eunso asked directly, "Was it Han Yujoo?" She was furious. When did they meet? Why didn't he tell her? She accused him of knowing how hard this was for her and doing this to her anyway. Do-hyun wearily admitted they had met, but it was really brief, and he just asked her to come to the wedding. Eunso threw a tantrum. She asked if they fought, if Yujoo was still holding on to feelings for him. She couldn't believe he just stood there and let her hit him, suspecting he still had feelings for her. He grabbed her hand, begging her to stop. He assured her it wasn't like that, and that Yujoo wasn't the type to hang on to feelings. Eunso looked at him with tears in her eyes. She accused him of still defending Han Yujoo even now. Do-hyun exploded. He begged her to stop talking about Han Yujoo, asking how many more times they had to fight. He yelled that he just told her to come to the wedding because Eunso was having a hard time. Eunso asked fearfully if he was mad at her. Do-hyun realized he had gone too far. Eunso burst into tears, saying how terrified she was every day that he would regret this. She confessed that Yujoo was a precious friend to her too, but she loved him. She had prepared herself to take all the blame to be with him and couldn't understand how he could do this to her. Do-hyun immediately started apologizing, pulling her into a hug. He said he was just on edge. He begged her not to cry, assuring her he just hated seeing her suffer, and his meeting with Yujoo was nothing. He comforted her like a baby. But his gaze was distant, his mind far away. Han Yujoo, you're probably still a boring woman, he thought. He held his fiancé, telling himself that this was right. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Jae asked Yujoo again if she wanted to get drinks, if she felt even a little bit sorry for him. Her face was reflected in his eye. Yujoo thought that the terminal illness must be a lie. But why would he pull a stunt like this? She said the joke had gone too far. It would have been easier to understand if he'd just said he wanted to hang out. He agreed that would be fine too, but added that he'd rather not if she had a boyfriend. Yujoo was silent. "Because I'm hitting on you, editor," he stated plainly. Yujoo put her head in her hand, unable to believe this was happening. She had lived thinking an uneventful day was happiness and the goal, but now she wasn't so sure. The wedding invitation flashed in her mind again. Now she was left to wonder what was so good about living like that all this time. "You don't want to?" Jae asked with a smile. Yujoo was silent, considering his offer. She remembered her boss's words about Jae being a well-behaved guy. She thought he was nothing like that. Was this how he usually made moves on staff? Normally, she would have obviously said no. But she kind of wanted something to happen, for things to get messed up. Yes, that's what she was after. A chaotic, special, massive event. She decided that if she was going to do something impulsive for once in her life, it had to be today. She decisively shut her laptop. "All right," she said. But she added that she'd take it as permission to write whatever she wanted in the article, whether it was his pathological lying or any personal life scandal. "Where are we going?" she asked. Just then, the assistant burst in, reminding Jae that the shoot wasn't over yet and he needed to take his shirt off. He calmly replied, "Got it." He started pulling off his sweater. Underneath was a sculpted torso. Yujoo couldn't help but blush. Jae ran a hand through his hair, completely unfazed. He turned and looked at her with a smirk. Yujoo stepped out of the studio to wait for him, contemplating her decision. His offer to get drinks echoed in her mind. "All right," she agreed in her head. But doubts immediately crept in. She hadn't even reported it to her team leader. What if he suggested an expensive place? She couldn't use the company card for that. She chided herself. Was that really the issue here? What if unnecessary problems arose? She decided she shouldn't go. Just then, he appeared behind her, dressed in a hoodie and a mask, and asked if she had waited long. He urged her to hurry, saying he'd snuck out to avoid people's eyes. In the distance, his assistant's cry could be heard. Jae grabbed Yujoo's hand, saying the taxi was here and they'd talk later. She didn't have time to respond. He pulled her along as they ran across the street. They ran through the night city. Yujoo's heart was pounding. What is this feeling? She wondered. They jumped into a taxi. Jae gave the driver an address and asked Yujoo if it was okay if they went to his place first. Yujoo was shocked and asked to be dropped off on the way. He asked coldly what she was talking about. That wasn't what they had agreed on. Yujoo started to explain that she was actually going to back out. She asked how he could suggest going to his place when they had just met for the first time. "It's not our first time meeting," he replied, confusing her. He took off his cap and mask, musing that a bar with a private room would be safer, but even that would be uncomfortable. He offered to go to her place if she preferred. Yujoo was silent, not knowing what to say. He reminded her that she said she'd stay with him, and that was definitely her making a move. Meanwhile, the following events were unfolding at one of the hotels. Clothes were scattered across the floor, making it clear they had been in a hurry to take them off. Eunso lay next to a sleeping Do-hyun. She carefully took his phone. She unlocked it. While he slept, she sat up, doing something on his phone. She was scrolling through his messages. She found a photo album of Yujoo and her contact in his phone. Of course. You fucking bastard. You didn't delete a single thing, she thought with hatred. She gently stroked his hair. Still, I won, she thought, cuddling up to him. She was sure there was no turning back now. She was convinced that Han Yujoo wouldn't be able to do anything anyway, unless her life suddenly changed. Back with Yujoo. She stood in front of a high-rise building. Jae invited her to come in. He took off his hoodie and walked into the spacious living room. Yujoo followed hesitantly. She sat down on the couch. She thought about how weird it was to pretend to be clueless while knowing everything, and how ridiculous it was that she had followed him all the way here. Jae opened a bottle of whiskey with a smirk. He poured 2 glasses. Yujoo admitted to herself that she was definitely nervous. She took out her notebook and asked if there was a reason for his condition. If it was an illness, what exactly was it? She jotted down in her notebook, Jae's terminal. Illness? She asked how it would affect his future activities or contracts. Jae took a sip, watching her silently. He leaned toward her, noting that she kept staring at her note. Yujoo replied it was a habit, and if it made him uncomfortable, she wouldn't write anything. But he said no. It was interesting. He observed that she wouldn't even make eye contact, but was diligent with her notes. Their knees accidentally touched. He apologized and suggested a toast. They clinked glasses. Yujoo took a sip and asked him to tell her the story from the beginning, asking how much time he really had left. He replied playfully, asking if she'd go home if he didn't tell her. He called her mean, saying he thought she liked him. Yujoo said seriously that it was important, and that's why she came all this way. She demanded he give this article to her as an exclusive. Jae was silent, looking at her. Yujoo wondered if she had overstepped. She began to explain that it was personal, but she was still a junior editor, and opportunities like this were really important for her. At that moment, he gently touched her cheek. He traced her lips with his finger, silencing her. Their faces were inches apart. She whispered his name. "Is that not okay?" he asked, cupping her face in his hands. Yujoo pulled back, explaining that the reason she was here wasn't because of personal feelings. It was exactly as she had explained. She had only one goal, his story, the sugar-coated misery of a star admired by everyone. "Okay," he said with a smile. He was well aware of her motives, and it amused him. He said he had nothing more to tell her. He got tested, the odds were 50-50, but he always imagined the unhappy outcome anyway. Yujoo asked if the company or anyone else knew. He replied that they shouldn't. The results would be out in about a year, and it would be annoying if word got out before then. He spread his arms wide, asking if he wasn't pitiful, and offered her a hug if she wanted. Yujoo was puzzled by his behavior. The rumors described him as blunt and cynical, but he seemed like a totally different person. She pulled away. Rejected again, he thought. He said they'd have to announce it eventually, but asked her to write the article at least 3 months from now. Until then, no one should know. Yujoo asked why he would trust her for 3 months in a world where rumors spread this fast. She could blow it up as a cover story right now. But you won't, he said confidently, because you're sickeningly kind. Those words echoed in her mind, reminding her of how others had always used her kindness. What does he even know? She thought, gripping her glass. She downed the whiskey in one gulp. She coughed from the strong liquor. Then, I'll ask the question this time, editor, Jay said. So, did you get your revenge? He clarified that he was talking about the story from before, about her friend marrying her ex-boyfriend. He reminded her of her own words about not covering sad stories. Yujoo remembered her inner monologue. She had told herself that living well and forgetting was the best revenge. No, it's not, a voice in her head screamed. That's just giving up. Helplessly. Or is it acting kind? Jay said that there seemed to be nothing she wouldn't endure. Enduring losing your boyfriend to a friend. Enduring being ignored at work. He had never seen someone who endured like that be happy. They lie, saying it's nothing. Yujoo clenched her teeth. She asked why he was talking like he already knew everything. I'm not just putting up with it. I literally can't do anything about it, she snapped. She stood up, saying this wasn't some drama. When regular people go through problems, it hurts, and all they can do is hope time will heal things. That's reality, she shouted. She broke down in tears, begging him to stop. He gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Now you look more human, he said. Before, you had that blank passport photo face. Yujoo grabbed her bag. She apologized, saying she couldn't trust their conversation. She asked him to just think of her as crazy and forget everything. She headed for the exit. She stepped out of the building. Suddenly, a camera flash lit up the darkness. Jay ran out after her. Wait, he said, grabbing her. He pulled her close. Yujoo looked at him, holding her breath. We're not done talking yet, he said, his eyes filled with tears. Yujoo replied that she didn't want to make any more mistakes. She'd had enough. Pick one, he said. Whatever you're putting up with, editor, I'll burn it down. She didn't understand what he meant. What is revenge, really? He asked with a devilish smile. You just have to make them regret it. Yujoo stared at him, wide-eyed. And it just so happens I want to be the good guy, he added, and I like you, editor. At that moment, they were photographed again. The flash illuminated their embrace. The next day, at the Seuda magazine office, Unso was playfully complaining to her coworkers about gaining weight. The junior staff showered her with compliments. They talked about how her social media post boosted a store's follower count. They called her a celebrity and the pride of the beauty department, while Unso modestly brushed it off. Off to the side, Yujoo sat quietly, working on her laptop. Unso told her coworkers to go ahead, saying she'd stay a bit longer. As they left, they whispered about how kind Unso was, even taking care of that one. They meant Yujoo. They gossiped about how Yujoo quit and then came back, and about rumors involving her boyfriend. Unso walked over to Yujoo's desk. She set a cup of coffee in front of her. Good morning, Yujoo, she said. She mentioned hearing about her sudden business trip yesterday and that she'd been looking for her. Yujoo, remembering the shoot, briefly replied that yes, she had been on a shoot. Unso immediately asked if it was an interview with Jay. She eagerly asked how it went and when the article would be ready, mentioning that the PR team was very interested. Surprised by the intensity, Yujoo said she'd finish the article soon. Unso explained that her interest was because the beauty department had also worked with Jay that day, and she wanted to make sure their makeup concepts didn't overlap. Yujoo replied that their overall concept was street, so there shouldn't be any overlap. Yeah, probably, Eunso agreed, taking a sip of her coffee. She added that next time, they should give each other a heads up to avoid confusion. After all, they were classmates and co-workers. Hearing that Yujoo had been suddenly thrown onto the assignment, Eunso pretended to be surprised. With fake sympathy, she asked if Yujoo had just been a replacement. She kept pressing, saying Yujoo's team treated her unfairly and that, as always, Yujoo was too nice to say anything. Yujoo cut her off, coldly asking, "Are you done, Editor Cha Eunso?" Eunso froze. She switched tactics and asked if Yujoo had met with Do-hyun. Their recent conversation flashed through Yujoo's mind. She stayed silent. "Oppa told me everything," Eunso continued. She knew Yujoo had hit him, and she knew how Do-hyun had begged her to stop fighting because of Yujoo. With fake concern, Eunso said it must have been hard for Yujoo, and that she should have stopped Do-hyun. She added that he was just really worried about her because she looked so sad. Yujoo let out a crooked smirk, calling it a very creative way of showing concern. Eunso went on, saying they used to be incredibly close, 10 years with no secrets. Memories of their school friendship resurfaced. "Yujoo, do you still feel that way?" Eunso asked, pleading with her not to avoid her. Yujoo tensed up. "Here we go again," she thought. That look like nothing ever happened, pretending to be sincere, making me seem like the only one overreacting. Eunso said that, honestly, she regretted losing a friend like her. But Yujoo kept working, wondering why it still hurt, and why she wanted to believe those words again. She looked up and firmly said she had never avoided her. They were just strangers to each other now. Eunso acted hurt, saying they were classmates, co-workers, and saw each other more often than family. She just didn't want things to be awkward. Yujoo bluntly asked what exactly she was trying to say. Eunso smiled and told her to just be careful. She reminded her that the magazine world is small, rumors spread fast, and anyone who gets involved with a friend's future husband ends up in the mud. "You know who I'm talking about, right?" she added. She demanded that Yujoo stay away from Do-hyun. Yujoo closed her laptop and stood up. She said she had actually been avoiding his messages, but he came to find her himself. "And what's even funnier," she added, "is that I'm standing here explaining myself to you. Do you even have the right to question me, Cha Eunso?" Eunso just smirked. She picked up her cup of coffee and, accidentally, spilled it right onto Yujoo's blouse. Yujoo gasped in shock. Eunso, perfectly calm, told her to keep it up. Explanations, clarifications, answers. That was all Yujoo's responsibility now. "Because I'm the fiancé," Eunso said, tapping Yujoo's chest with her finger. "And you're nothing." She added that Yujoo shouldn't leave work early. With a bright smile, she invited her to the wedding, to take a photo together. Yujoo stood there, completely stunned. The next day, Jae was riding in a car. He sat in the back seat, scrolling through his phone. He found Han Yujoo's Instagram profile and hit follow. He stared at her page thoughtfully. Meanwhile, back at the office, Yujoo was completely lost in her thoughts. A coworker called out to her, snapping her out of it. He urged her to hurry up and pick the shots, asking why she seemed so distracted today. Yujoo apologized, saying her head was all over the place. He started asking curiously what had happened during the shoot, but Yujoo brushed it off. She said she just didn't sleep well and suggested they get back to work. Her coworker was thrilled with the photos. He'd been worried the style might be too simple, but the results exceeded all expectations. He couldn't stop praising Jae's face, saying there wasn't a single bad shot. "His face is the content," he concluded. Snapping back to focus, Yujoo told him not to get distracted and to choose carefully, reminding him that anything that kills the product gets cut immediately. She professionally filtered through the shots. The one with harsh lighting, the one where the lipstick shade didn't match the brand. "And this one," she said, pointing at a photo, "where his eyes are captured perfectly. That's definitely the best shot." At that moment, her eyes widened. Jae's words about revenge and helplessly backing down echoed in her mind. Yujoo flinched, shaking off the thought. Why am I even thinking about that nonsense? She asked herself. She decided to forget it. That night was like a jewel behind glass, shining, but out of reach. She told her coworker the photos were selected and needed to be sent to the team lead. She stood up to deliver the materials and noticed a strange atmosphere in the office. Everyone was whispering. Coworkers glanced at her and whispered among themselves. She walked over to the team leader's desk to report that the photo selection was complete. The team lead held up her phone and coldly asked, "What is this?" On the screen was a news article with the headline, "Top Star J Caught on a Date." The photo showed him and Yujoo. The phone slipped from Yujoo's hands in shock. The whole office was buzzing. All she wanted was one normal day without any drama, but her world was falling apart. She stared at the photo, praying it wasn't real. In the conference room, her boss looked at her with disappointment. This is the worst-case scenario, Yujoo thought. Holding printed photos, her boss asked directly, "That was you, right?" She added that rumors were already spreading that the woman in the photo was an editor, though her identity hadn't been confirmed yet. Yujoo tried to explain, saying it was a misunderstanding, that there had been an interview after the shoot that day. But her boss wasn't having it. An editor at a model's place at that hour? There was no excuse for that. She demanded to know why Yujoo went there without informing the company. Jay's words echoed in Yujoo's mind again. What if I die? Maybe I won't, but it's 50-50. Yujoo stammered apologies, saying she had no such intentions and wasn't pursuing any personal agenda. She couldn't admit that she had chased an unverified rumor. Whatever your intentions were, this is the result, her boss said, tossing the photos onto the table. She explained that if a rumor like this gets tied to a photo shoot sponsored by an advertiser, their partnership could fall apart. She asked who would take responsibility now, since Yujoo had been in charge on site. This was my mistake, Yujoo admitted. But her boss snapped. She sarcastically suggested saying that to the advertiser. It was the editor's mistake. See you next issue. Yujoo stood there with her head down, unable to hold back her tears. Her boss said she was deeply disappointed. She had wanted to push this project forward for Yujoo, but Yujoo ruined it herself. She added that the cover was now a risk for the advertiser, and the article might even get pulled. At that moment, the door burst open. A coworker rushed in, shouting that it was chaos outside. He ran up to them, not even knowing where to begin. The same news was on his phone. Excited, he said that preview shots from the shoot and the rumors had gone viral on Instagram and TikTok. Over 50,000 reposts, and a 30-second clip on YouTube had already passed 700,000 views. "This is huge!" he exclaimed. The boss snapped, reminding him they were talking about risk to the advertiser, not views. Stumbling over his words, the coworker explained that since Yujoo had been there at dawn, the photos came out looking very romantic. It matched the photo shoot concept, so people assumed it was staged. The reaction had been surprisingly positive. They were being flooded with messages asking about the magazine's release date. The PR team reported that the brand had suddenly requested traffic analytics. The boss was completely baffled. Yujoo didn't understand anything either. The coworker added that he'd contacted Jay's marketing team, and they hinted it could be used as conceptual viral content. Yujoo stood there between her excited coworker and her stunned boss. Regaining her composure, the boss said that viral trends are fleeting, and it would be up to the brand to decide whether this becomes a problem or just noise. She turned to Yujoo and strictly said that even if she got lucky, she shouldn't take pride in gaining attention this way. "I understand. I'm sorry," Yujoo replied quietly. She went to the restroom. She turned on the faucet. She splashed water on her face, trying to collect herself. A scandal? Photos? None of it made sense. Since when were they being photographed? Had things really gone this far? Was the whole project ruined? She remembered her coworker's words about going viral. If the PR team was right, maybe this could turn into something positive? She went back to her desk. Her phone was buzzing non-stop with notifications. She opened the news. In all her years working, she'd never been noticed, Never given a chance like this. In the comments, people were praising the concept and assuming it was a planned PR stunt. Yujoo tried to think rationally. Nothing had actually improved. What if everything went wrong again? She noticed a huge number of notifications on Instagram. She opened the app and froze. Dozens, hundreds of people were following her account. How did they even find her? She was in shock. She opened Jay's profile with 1.2 million followers. So that's it, she thought. Is this a golden ticket? Backstage at the photo shoot, the air was buzzing with energy. Staff, models, and managers hurried through the hallways, creating a busy yet tense atmosphere. In the dressing room, Jay was lounging in a chair. He looked relaxed, but his thoughtful gaze gave him away. He was waiting for something. His manager walked up and handed him his phone. She called him Tai, a name that sounded far more down-to-earth than his stage persona. Nuna started lecturing him, advising him not to go online and check the public's reaction, but to just wait for the storm to pass. But Jay waved her off. He was worried about something else entirely. He opened Instagram and found Yujoo's profile. It was empty. The account had been completely deleted. He knew instantly. She had freaked out and erased everything because of him. Jay turned to Nuna with an almost childlike question. If someone deletes their account right after he follows them, did that mean she hated him? And what was he supposed to do now? All his celebrity confidence vanished in an instant. Nuna asked in surprise who on earth he had followed. Jay calmly replied, editor Han Yujoo. The manager flew into a panic. She grabbed her head, yelling that he had just poured gasoline on a fire that was already raging. She was terrified that a new scandalous article had surfaced somewhere. She plopped down in the chair opposite him, completely baffled as to what Jay and their CEO were even thinking. Everyone was demanding an official statement, and instead, they were just making things worse. Nuna lamented that the boss should be preparing a response, not making them track down some girl. Jay didn't seem to care in the slightest. He just smirked, thinking that the high public interest was a good thing. Free viral marketing, so why not? Nuna wouldn't let it go. She didn't understand why he'd suddenly caused such a scene, as it was so out of character for him. And why did he take her to his place, knowing paparazzi were swarming everywhere? His gaze clouded over for a moment, taking him back to the memories of that night. He remembered how close they had been. Jay admitted to himself that he had actually wanted much more. He remembered assuring Yujoo that he had followed her not because of any personal feelings, but for the reasons he'd already explained. And it was a bold-faced lie. Snapping back to reality, he gave a wry smile. He had only stopped because he was afraid she would really start avoiding him, though maybe she was too kind and would have let it slide. Nuna looked at him seriously. She stated that they had been working together for years, and he could lie to anyone else, but not to her. She demanded a straight answer to one question. Were he and the editor really dating? Without batting an eye, Jay replied, "Not yet." The manager let out a sigh of relief. She thought so, thank God. But then the meaning of his words sank in. Wait, what? Not yet? Her eyes widened in horror. Jay closed his eyes with a satisfied smile. He confirmed her worst fears, stating that he was planning to confess to her. Nuna was speechless. The situation was spiraling out of control. And Jay, leaning back in his chair, said dreamily that he was very interested in her. At that same moment, Yujoo was walking into her office building. Every glance felt like a judgment. She nervously thought that maybe she should have worn a mask. But she quickly tried to reassure herself. It would be fine. She wasn't that important. It was just paranoia. Besides, her face wasn't visible in the photo. The elevator doors began to close, but a hand stopped them with a shout of, "Wait, please!" It was her senior colleague, her Sunbae. Out of breath, he thanked her and then recognized her. Stepping into the elevator, he breathed a sigh of relief. He thought he was going to be late, and if it weren't for her, he wouldn't have made it. The colleague noted that she looked terrible and guessed she must have been worried sick about all the commotion. Yujoo just brushed it off, assuring him it would all be sorted out soon. He changed the subject. curiously asking if Jae would still be the cover model after such a scandal. In the crowded elevator, other colleagues joined their conversation. They confirmed that Jae wasn't being replaced. The buzz was actually great for the magazine. Everyone was guessing who the mysterious woman could be. An idol? A rookie actress? Someone mentioned that Jae had apparently followed some account and it immediately went viral. Obviously, he was dating a celebrity. And then came the most terrifying rumor, that the girl worked at their company. Yujoo's heart plummeted. In a panic, as soon as the elevator doors opened, she bolted out, trying to escape the conversation. But it was too late. The moment she entered the office, someone called her name. Yujoo found herself surrounded by a tight circle of curious colleagues. Questions flew at her from all sides. Was it true Jae followed her? Why did she delete her account? Are they really dating? They were laughing and teasing, oblivious to her discomfort. Someone suggested it was just a work connection, but their curiosity was overwhelming. Completely exhausted by the onslaught, Yujoo mumbled an apology and hurried to her desk. She dropped her bag on her chair, wishing everyone would just leave her alone. The colleague from the elevator approached her desk. He remarked with disdain how hypocritical people were. Just yesterday they were ignoring her or dumping their work on her, and now suddenly they were all being so nice. He advised her not to answer their questions, since all they wanted was fresh gossip. Yujoo managed a tired smile, saying she didn't really understand what was going on either. At that moment, another employee approached them. She informed Han Yujoo that the PR team needed to see her immediately. She was to go to the meeting room on the 12th floor. Yujoo numbly nodded, having no idea what they wanted from her. Her kind colleague grew concerned. He guessed it was because of yesterday's events and told her she could refuse if it was too much. But Yujoo, gathering her strength, assured him it was fine. She hesitantly entered the meeting room, announcing that she had been summoned. And she froze in the doorway in absolute shock. There he was, Jae, sitting in a chair at the table, calmly fiddling with something in his hands, waiting for her. Their eyes met. Yujoo couldn't utter a single word, staring at the cause of all her morning's chaos. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, life went on. Yujoo's ex-boyfriend, Do-hyun, was on a smoke break with his colleagues. One of them lazily asked how the wedding preparations were going. Do-hyun indifferently replied that he had no idea. His fiancé, Unso, was handling everything. His colleagues started discussing the fancy venue they had booked, a place you had to reserve a year in advance. Do-hyun just muttered through clenched teeth that they had gone over budget. He complained that Unso kept picking new things: the dress, the flowers, the music. With a heavy sigh, he concluded that it was all a waste of money. A colleague teased him, asking why he was talking about it like it was someone else's problem. Was he getting the wedding blues? After all, he was marrying his ex's best friend. The wedding of the century. Do-hyun ignored him, silently taking a sip of his coffee. Unexpectedly, another colleague asked how Yujoo was doing, adding that she was pretty. A third guy didn't know who they were talking about, and it was explained to him. She was Do-hyun's ex-girlfriend. The colleague remembered seeing her a couple of times when she brought Do-hyun lunch. Do-hyun coldly remarked that she was probably fine. She was always the same. Just then, one of the guys pulled out his phone and showed the others an Instagram post. He said the woman in the photo had a vibe that reminded him of Yujoo, even though you couldn't see her face. Another one scoffed, noting that the girl who dumped Do-hyun was now apparently with a celebrity. Do-hyun whipped around. He snatched the phone from his colleague's hand to get a closer look. The headline screamed, "Jae's dating rumor causes an uproar," and the photo was of Jae with a girl whose face was pixelated, but was unmistakably Yujoo. Do-hyun's face twisted in astonishment and shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. Back in the meeting room, Jae unfolded the piece of paper he'd been fiddling with. It was a small origami heart. He smiled and asked how she'd been. Yujoo, still in shock, asked what he was doing here. Jae calmly replied that he had a meeting. She tried to usher him out, saying the guest meeting rooms were on another floor and he must be mistaken. But Jae smirked and declared he came specifically to see her, the editor. Yujoo cut him off, stating she wasn't informed about this, and turned to leave. But her phone buzzed. It was a message from her team leader, asking her to look after the guest until she got back in 30 minutes. Yujoo was trapped. Jae smiled smugly. He had planned this perfectly. Yujoo sighed heavily, giving in. She apologized for her team leader's delay and awkwardly offered him something to drink. He was lazily sipping his coffee through a straw, saying that if she was offering coffee, he was sick of it. Jae started looking around, remarking that it was his first time at a meeting in a magazine office. They usually worked in studios. He asked to see the editing room, but Yujoo sharply told him to get back to his seat. She was at her breaking point. "That's not what I meant!" she exclaimed, unable to contain her emotions. A wave of anxiety washed over her. She asked why his agency team wasn't there. What if new rumors started because they were seen together alone? He simply asked, why? Yujoo grabbed her head, not knowing how to explain the obvious to him. Jae leaned back in his chair. He said she wasn't answering his calls or messages, and since he was interested, he decided to take the first step and come in person. She tried to get through to him, explaining that this was all a huge risk. Hadn't he been warned too? Yujoo poured out all her frustration. Why did he follow her account? Because of him, the speculation had blown up to incredible proportions, and now everyone was trying to figure out who the woman in the photo was. He looked at her with an innocent expression. Ah, was that not allowed? Why not? He asked, as if he truly didn't understand. She replied that it could hurt him. Yujoo explained that she would be forgotten quickly, but he was a brand. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Her concern for him, instead of herself, took him by surprise. She continued, saying she didn't blame him and took responsibility too. The photo shoot had almost been canceled. Now, they needed to focus on damage control, and she was willing to help. He nervously fidgeted with the paper heart. He apologized, saying he just wanted to contact her. Yujoo accused him of doing it on purpose, but he replied with disarming sincerity that he was just a fool and didn't know. And then he added with a sly smile that he did it because he was worried about her. Yujoo was thrown off. Maybe she had created this image of an arrogant celebrity in her own head. Looking at him now, he seemed just like a kid. Jae had thought she was mad at him and felt a wave of relief realizing she wasn't. But should she be angry? Her entire day had been turned upside down because of him. Her routine life, where nothing ever happened, was constantly being threatened by explosive events. She admitted to herself, she wasn't angry. It's just, right now, she had been really worried too. She felt so insignificant that if she disappeared right now, nobody would even care. At that moment, she lightly kicked his shoe under the table. He pointed out the irony of the situation. Wasn't it strange? Right now, everyone was curious about who she was. He said her current state was like a flashy, noisy dream. Her hands were fidgeting nervously. He gently covered them with his own, stilling the movement. "What do you want to do?" he asked softly. He suggested they could clarify the situation, say it wasn't true, but his gaze said otherwise. He leaned closer, whispering that, as she said, it would be forgotten soon. Yujoo suggested the standard press release statement. They are close colleagues, she is a non-celebrity, and please refrain from excessive speculation. She explained that she was worried about his image because for a regular person like her, it didn't matter how she responded. Jae smirked. His image couldn't get any worse. Compared to rumors about him being gay or a cheater, this was actually an improvement. It could even be seen as good PR. He said the agency told him he could do as he pleased. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "What should we do?" he whispered. He added that, depending on what they did, it could be taken as confirming the rumors, and that he listens well, especially to women. At that moment, her phone, which had fallen to the floor, started ringing, shattering the intimate atmosphere. The screen lit up with the name, Pyun Do-yeon, her ex. Jae saw the name and, with a faint smile, told her to answer it, as the call seemed urgent. On the other end, Do-yeon sounded tense. He got straight to the point, demanding to know if she was the one in the photo on social media. He had already told everyone it was impossible. He added, condescendingly, that it wasn't even funny. There was no way she'd be involved with a celebrity. Yujoo had heard enough and told him she was hanging up. Doyeon panicked, demanding that she say something. Jae listened intently to every word. Doyeon continued his tirade, saying celebrities just toy with people like her and that she shouldn't be an idiot. He kept insisting he was worried about her. Jae's patience ran out. He swiftly took the phone from her hand. Before he could say anything, she covered his own mouth with her hand, her eyes wide as she looked at him. And with his thumb, she ended the call. Doyeon stared at his phone in a rage. He couldn't believe she had dared to hang up on him. An electric silence filled the meeting room. Their hearts pounded in unison as they stared at each other. Jae slowly moved her hand from his mouth and gently cupped her cheek. A thought flashed through Yujoo's mind. The things she longed for, the things she loved, were always things she could never have. Jae watched her silently, as if reading her thoughts. He understood her. She looked at him, and he asked quietly, "What do I need to do?" With those words, he pulled her closer. "Instead of rumors, should we make something real?" he whispered, his hand sliding down to her waist. And he kissed her, deeply, passionately, but without love. "You don't have to love me," he said, pulling back. "I won't either." At that exact moment, the door to the meeting room slammed open. Standing in the doorway were his manager, Yujoo's team leader, and several other colleagues. Their faces were masks of pure and utter shock. One of the colleagues asked in horror what Yujoo was doing. All she could stammer was that it was JJ. A natural-born actor reacted instantly. He pulled Yujoo into a comforting hug and asked defiantly, "Isn't it obvious?" Nuna immediately jumped to the rescue. She let out a hysterical laugh and started sputtering an excuse that Jae sometimes did this to get into character, to sync up with emotions. She pulled Yujoo away from him, continuing the charade. Allegedly, he had come to discuss something with the editor and was asking for help. Yujoo, still in shock, played along. She said he was having trouble with his poses and she was just giving him a little assistance. Nuna, looking at Yujoo, thought to herself that she was far too beautiful for a regular employee. She apologized for her client, but her eyes shone with admiration for Yujoo's quick thinking. In that awkward moment, another person appeared. The team leader introduced him as the CEO of RR Entertainment, Jae's agency. The CEO had come to the meeting in person. Yujoo politely introduced herself, stating her name and position. The CEO sized her up with an appreciative gaze. "So, you're Han Yujoo. Nice to meet you." He shook her hand with a smile, adding that she had a nice mask, an ambiguous compliment that could refer to her calm expression or her role in this whole affair. He confessed that he was familiar with her work. He loved how she interpreted interviews, turning them into fairy tales that perfectly complemented the photos. And that was precisely why he had personally requested Han Yujoo to write the column on Jae. In that moment, Yujoo understood everything. Her assignment had been no accident. She remembered the phone call. She'd been summoned for an emergency on-site assignment, just to conduct an interview. It had all been a setup from the beginning. Yujoo politely thanked him, still processing the information. The CEO, ignoring the tense atmosphere, asked how she had written about Jae in her article. Yujoo swallowed nervously. She explained her concept. Jae as the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. The CEO loved the idea. He said with a smile that it fit perfectly. Everyone sat down at the conference table. The CEO explained that he came personally because his entire company relied on one single artist, Jae. He got to the main point, the scandal. He informed them that they had confirmed through the company that nothing happened that night, and the editor's access records were brief. "But what matters more than facts," he said, extending a hand towards her, "is the result we have right now." He admitted that at first, they were furious and had even considered demanding compensation for damages from her company. Yujoo's colleagues tensed up. Jae smirked at his boss. He cut him off, asking why he was trying to scare them, since that wasn't why he came. Yujoo thought with a glimmer of hope, Was he going to help them? The CEO laughed. He said that over the past day, his position had changed. The negative keywords associated with Jay's name in search engines were starting to disappear. Yujoo's colleague confirmed it was the same for them. The content announcing the photo shoot was getting unusually high engagement, and pre-orders were skyrocketing. He admitted it was unexpected for them too, since Jay's name was usually associated with nothing but negative gossip. The CEO explained that an artist who was previously only seen on stage and in commercials now seemed more human and approachable. Usually, a woman next to a male celebrity is an automatic negative for his image, but not this time. It was all because Jay's personal life had been a complete mystery until now. And when that veil of secrecy was lifted just a little, it came across as something fresh and new. The CEO laughed and clapped Jay on the shoulder, saying he usually hides him away because he talks too much. Then he became serious again and asked what their magazine's plan was. Yujoo spoke up. She judiciously pointed out that a clumsy excuse would only backfire and be labeled as a lie. And since she wasn't a public figure, people would start to fill in the blanks with their own fantasies. Instead of fueling the rumors, she proposed creating a clear concept. To use this photo as part of the plan. The CEO immediately grasped her idea. A couple concept made to look like a paparazzi shot? He liked it. He asked her directly if she was prepared to go all in and fully expose herself. Otherwise, the public's imagination would run wild. Her team leader whispered worriedly, asking if Yujoo would be okay. Jay's words echoed in her memory. Pick one of the things you're enduring, and I'll set it on fire. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about making them regret it. Yujoo answered with a firm voice. Yes, I'll be okay. Jay and his CEO exchanged a look of understanding. Then, Yujoo, emboldened, added that she would like to request the full support of RR Entertainment. The CEO clasped his hands together and nodded with a satisfied smile. Good. In that case, we'll give our full support on our side. The deal was sealed. Meanwhile, Do-hyun was trying to call Yujoo again, only to hear that the number was no longer in service. She had blocked him. His colleague noticed his anger and asked what Yujoo had said. Do-hyun tried to lie, saying it was the wrong number, but his friend just laughed, pointing out that he had run off with a face twisted in rage. The friend brought up Yujoo again, calling her looks top tier and asking Do-hyun to introduce him. Do-hyun cut him off sharply, saying their lunch break was almost over, and turned to leave. He threw over his shoulder coldly, not to talk about her like she was an object. The colleague wouldn't let up, catching up to him. He asked the question that had apparently been bothering him for a while. So why did you break up with Yujoo anyway? Do-hyun froze. The question hung in the air, and Do-hyun's face was a canvas of complex, unspoken emotions. Okay, guys. Can we just take a second to breathe after that? Because my heart is literally pounding right now. I am living for Yujoo finally standing up for herself. Like, can we talk about how much of a snake Unso is? Pretending to be a precious friend while literally planning a wedding with Yujoo's ex of 5 years? Girl, please. And don't even get me started on Do-hyun. The absolute audacity of that man to gaslight her and then get mad when he sees the scandal. Pure trash. But then, there's Jay. Seriously, is he a red flag? Probably. Do I care? Absolutely not. That line where he said, "Whatever you're putting up with, I'll burn it down." Hello? I am obsessed. The way he's basically using his entire career to give her the ultimate revenge? It is so messy, so risky, and I am here for every single second of it. I honestly don't know if Yujoo is ready for this golden ticket or if her life is about to become a total disaster, but I cannot wait to find out. We're just getting to the best part, so you guys better stay tuned for the next update because things are about to get wild. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you're rooting for Yujoo and Jay as much as I am, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss the continuation. Sending you all so much love and big hugs. See you in the next one. Bye!